Alright, now that we've talked about the very worst that this year had, or this past year had to offer, um, maybe now it's not too late that we can try to get back in good graces and talk about the stuff that was the absolute best. So, yeah, it's not near as late as it usually is when we do this list, so yeah, we're good to go. Obviously, I saw about 250 movies in total that came out in 2017. The only real glaring omission, I think, is I haven't gotten to Phantom Thread yet. I literally just got back from Molly's game. So, yeah, but I'm not, given I don't have the passion for Paul Thomas Anderson that I used to, and it appears to be a particular genre I'm not always crazy about, I kind of feel confident, not that I'm not going to give Phantom Thread the chance to be something incredible when I do see it, but I think there's a really good chance that this is going to be the 10 or 11 that we're looking at, so, because I'm doing the usual, we'll do an honorable mention and then the 10. But before I do that, I probably should mention that there will be a couple of other things besides Phantom Thread that are missing, and I feel like I need to draw attention to them mainly because of the fact that they're quite popular and beloved, and there's no real intention here, and it's not like I hate them or anything, but there are two particular movies that didn't quite make this list that I really like a lot, but I imagine that there will be people who for some reason can't just stick to their own hearts and say, well, I feel this way, and if this person feels this way, then fine, even though it's different from me. Yes, if you came here specifically looking for Logan or Blade Runner, I'm sorry. They didn't quite get there. Logan, I got to rewatch Logan recently. I still like it a lot. And Blade Runner I did like, but I further elaborate on the review I did when it first came out. So yeah, the 11 listed here I liked much more. And it's kind of a bummer because usually there's like at least a few really small movies that I tend to put on here that aren't really that heard of, and I really like kind of getting them out there. Stuff like the Stanford Prison Experiment or Meadowland a couple years ago. There aren't really any of those this time, with maybe possibly one of them. It's more or less it's a pretty basic list, unfortunately. But the thing is if I tried to go in and put smaller or lesser known things in just for the sake of it, then it would be kind of insincere, because because a lot of the really beloved movies this year I either didn't get along with or I just thought they were good, like Good Time. I did like Good Time a lot, but then kind of my review of it was quite positive, but the thing is when I had time to really think about it and wasn't on the high of having just seen it, it was kind of like, well, maybe this was a little wrong with it, maybe it was a bit too flashy for its own good, but it's still really good, but once again, didn't quite make it here. So, if any of that is going to anger you, you might as well just go be angry somewhere else, because there's just go make your own list and be quite happy with it, and end it there. You don't need me or any other random fuck on YouTube to validate how you feel about Logan or Blade Runner. I promise you it's gonna be fine, okay? They are still the movie that you love without every single person thinking it's one of the greatest things that this year had to offer, so I'm just putting that out there. Speaking of large fan bases, hopefully nobody raises a fuss that my honorable mention is gonna be Dunkirk. I know. I thought it was going to be higher too, but a couple more things came out and bumped it down to the honorable mention. And that's not to take anything away from the amazing thing that Dunkirk is. Dunkirk is this massive... And obviously Nolan was always... Like, this is one of those cases where I used to be like an enormous Nolan fan and thought his movies were untouchable. I kind of did grow out of that, but I mean, knowing that he was going to be making a movie like this is about what we expected. This really grand spectacle, kind of playing with the timeline is another trademark of his, and it just really, and he made something that we really haven't seen in this genre for a really long time, if at all. He made it PG-13, he made it under 2 hours, and still made it feel like this giant epic. And there are so many things about it that are brilliantly done, whether it be the way it's shot, even and obviously I really love what he did with the timeline. That was just incredible. But there's also the whole idea of not really focusing on any particular character. And the characters that we do focus on are, and this is a criticism it often received, that where it kind of seemed like we didn't quite get enough character to really care about them, but I don't really think that was the point of the movie. It certainly helps, and I think there is enough in there to justify, caring what happens to individual characters, but really just in general, it just feels more like kind of an experience that we don't quite get with these movies, and we always have these, like, usually maybe not so much as there used to be, but the World War II movie has usually been, it's going to be this big kind of Oscar-y thing, and Dunkirk doesn't feel like that, despite the fact that it might have the same accomplishments. And that's what I appreciate the most about it, is it really, even though we have a lot of movies like this, Nolan did his Nolan thing and gave us something that we feel like we don't see often, or I guess if at all. So, yes. So Dunkirk is definitely, worthy of being at the top tier. So, but as I said, there were 10 more. My number 10 is going to be Only the Brave. Once again, a movie I was not expecting to care this much about. It kind of falters a little bit at the start because it's got that cheesy title, and that may kind of drive people away, and it just kind of comes off as like a generic, true story hero movie that we often get. And a lot of the times, even though they're a true story, they don't really deliver on what that promises. But this movie makes its characters so vivid and gives us a career best performance from Josh Brolin, which is a high bar. And just makes everything so human and tragic, and makes almost every individual character, at least the ones we see in the foreground, come from their own particular place, and they're this own individual person. And the movie is less focused on looking straight at the direction we know we're going to go, because we know these kind of movies. But they kind of put that on hold, and it's like, that's not, where we're going to go is not the important thing. It's how we feel on the way there, and then how we're going to feel once that event happens. And there's so much focus on the humanity and the emotion, and everybody in this giant cast is giving it their all. There's, there's love stories going on, there's redemption stories going on, there's really touching stories of friendship going on, all this stuff. And like I said, even when it comes to an ultimate tragic end, the movie has been so good about the way it handles these characters, and presents them to the audience, that you feel every single hit, and just the way it's executed, that it's rare. It feels like it's rare that we see true stories like this handled in such a way that they really hit in the way they're supposed to without remotely feeling manipulative or anything like that. So that really took me by surprise. That's probably like the biggest surprise of the year for sure. Number 9 is going to be It Comes at Night. Another movie that was kind of done in by its marketing, and a lot of people left pissed off because they didn't quite get what they thought they were in for, which I do understand. But I did know what I was in for, and that was definitely an asset going in, where obviously it's the same studio that did stuff like The Witch and Into the Forest, so it's going to pretty much feel like that. And it does, but it also has its own thing going on, and different themes, and certainly different characters. Joel Edgerton is incredible in the lead role here, and where we kind of play with the characters and our expectations, where we're not quite sure, like, there's one set of characters that seem to be our heroes, and one set of characters that kind of seem to be ambiguous. But then as the movie goes on, you realize that from any kind of perspective, either one of these groups could be on the other side. And it just happens to be the direction the movie starts in. we realize kind of has thrown us off. And then once you think about it more, you realize that kind of everybody is ambiguous and we don't know where people are exactly coming from. There's this whole sinister mystery surrounding what all this is. And then the way like I said, my theory on the title was the way they approach, like, what's in the night, like, the way the night brings out your ultimate fear, like, and uses your imagination against you, to where if you're gonna suddenly have a crippling fear of something, there's a really good chance that it's gonna be the night that brings that about. Where if there's just even the most outlandish things in your mind that you think you're in danger of being attacked by or whatever, will suddenly seem so real in the night as opposed to the day. And I think that's just really a really great approach for a movie like this. And like I said, the way they bring it, I mean, there's a lot. There's also a movie that could probably be accused a lot of, one of those nothing happens movies. A lot happens in this movie. It really does. And gets increasingly more intense as it goes, and leads you to a finale that will just gut punch the fuck out of you. And so I got pretty much everything I was expecting out of this, and a little bit more. I wasn't quite expecting to love it this much, but I totally did. My number 8, I'll try to get through quickly, but I might get hung up on because it's a movie I never got to review. I never got the chance to, for time's sake, but it's Personal Shopper. The Olivier Assayas movie where he reunited with Kristen Stewart after doing Clouds of Sils Maria. Worth noting, Clouds of Sils Maria is the movie that made me pretty much fall in love with Kristen Stewart as an actress. And he specifically wrote this part for her because he liked working with her so much. And this movie it's one of those movies that works in so many different ways. Because it's, when you hear the setup, he basically said that it was a ghost story within the fashion industry. And you kind of think, okay, but yeah, this is really played up as like you see it on the outskirts and you know Assayas' filmography and you kind of think, well, maybe it'll be one of those kind of arty horror movies or whatever, something kind of like It Comes at Night. Not quite like It Comes at Night, but maybe like It Comes at Night, but more European feeling or something. But no, it actually feels like a horror movie a lot of the time, but in kind of a, once again, mysterious kind of way. Like I was honestly a little thrown off in like the first 10 minutes when we do see a ghost. And it was, but as the movie goes on, it becomes so many different things. A lot of which is a character study, but of just this one character pretty much. That's all the focus we need. And she plays this really interesting character to where it's like we see her and we get, you can tell it was written specifically for Kristen Stewart. She dresses like her, she acts like her, she like sulks like her. But then when she tries on these clothes that she's forbidden to try on because they belong to the famous actress that she works for, they transform her into another person. Like her posture changes, her personality changes, just, and you can just see that in her performance when she's two totally different people depending on what she's wearing. No dialogue necessary, and it's just really intoxicating. And then there's this whole plot going on with her getting mysterious text messages that may or may not be from beyond the grave, and that in itself is this really creepy thing that's going throughout the whole movie. It reminded me a lot of, if anybody saw The Dying Gaul with Peter Sarsgaard, it's kind of like that if you don't know what's going on the other side. And it's also, I mean, I don't know how else to word this, there's something really sexy about this movie, too. And it's in kind of that way where it, like, with this quality, it feels like you're being lured in by it as it goes on. And, yeah, like I said, intoxicating is the word that keeps coming to mind, but it's also, as a horror movie goes, yeah, it's creepy as hell. And that is that's a huge asset to the movie, is it can legitimately be kind of scary when it wants to be. And with all these different things going on, it just makes it really feels like kind of a unique experience, this movie. But like I said, it's like, it does kind of have that feel of Clouds of Sils Maria, kind of the same vibe, just with a lot of horror. And even that movie kind of had a really weird mystery to it, like how Stewart's character just up and vanishes from the movie, and nobody knows why. And it's like the feeling that movie left you with there kind of carries over into this, and it just, yeah, it really leaves you with this mysterious kind of creepiness throughout. But yeah, it works on so many levels in all those different ways. So I was really happy with that. Number 7 is going to be the Florida Project, where Sean Baker, who gave us Tangerine, thrusts us into yet another world that's kind of in a big city but kind of off in the corner. And it's another one where the characters are a very strong asset. That's going to be a continuous thing here. Where we're following these kids, these small 6-year-old kids that have these full personalities, without doing the annoying precocious thing or being just in general the annoying kid characters. Like I said, following them around feels like kind of like David Gordon Green in his early days or something. Just in this really kind of, where David Gordon Green kind of stays in the mundane and doesn't do a whole lot of flash. This movie deals with the mundane but feels also very flashy in itself, and how Baker was really good about kind of bringing these kind of drab places to life using like colors and production design and the already existing buildings that have these designs that just kind of pop out and just give this really rundown place this really vibrant life. And all of this is brought together with this incredible Willem Dafoe performance that's just as sensitive as it is authoritative. And one minute we think he's going to snap at the kids, the other minute he's going to defend them or ultimately save them. And it's just just watching him through this whole thing and just seeing the weight of the world on his shoulders, just having to run this hotel. It's really one of the best performances of the year, with one of the best scenes of the year in the middle, which I talked about in the review and probably shouldn't go too farther into, but so yes, really, and the kind of mother-daughter relationship too, to where it feels like we should really, really hate this mother character, but the way that the movie kind of sets up the whole environment, where it's like we do have an empathy, or at least most of us probably will, while we're hating this character, and having those conflicting emotions can always be kind of ultimately rewarding if we get to a certain place. Or just the fact that the movie can bring that out of us, and we don't just feel one particular thing towards a character we probably should feel one thing towards. It really shows how well the characters are created and presented to us, but yeah, and obviously, Brooklyn Prince, the lead, pretty much, the youngest girl, is amazing as well. So, once again, there's like the story of friendship in there, but there's also the whole thing with Defoe, then the mom kind of has her own thing going on, and all of these stories really work, and all of them really could be their own movie. And they'd all be really good, too, so that's that. Number 6 is Get Out. Yeah, a movie I wasn't necessarily expecting to be here back when I saw it in February, nor were we expecting to see it in all these awards lineups. And the thing is obviously there's getting a little backlash, because when a movie like this, that was kind of seen back when it came out, and it was like, well, that was effective, and the critics loved it, and it was memorable, and then it seemed like we moved on, and now that it's getting all this awards talk, everybody's talking about how overrated it is and all that. But for me, it keeps getting better. I have seen it 4 times now, and the thing about it is, when we first saw it, I talked about the fact that I thought Peele's script was really well thought out, and there were like so many little details in there, and the way everything kind of led to another, and all the foreshadowing and all that, and I just kept saying it's so well thought out, this script. And then it's like, I had no idea. I really had no idea when I was saying that. Because it's one of those movies where every time you watch it now, you probably notice 3 new things that he threw in there just so subtly, or maybe not so subtly. The thing I noticed last time that I feel stupid for not realizing before was when they're tracking down their prey, they're playing the Run Rabbit Run song. And then when they're having dessert, the first time he meets her parents, Catherine Keener brings out carrot cake. And it's like stuff that's just right out there in the open that just goes right by you. And there is so much of that. And whether it be the way the camera shifts to somebody at just the right time, and it's like the movie's just constantly throwing foreshadowing and clues at you, and the fact that it doesn't feel blatant because there's so much you miss unless you see it multiple times, just shows the real brilliance of it. And the performances too are really standing out. Some people are wondering, why is Daniel Kaluuya always getting nominated right now? And it's like, well, that's interesting. But then I watch it back and it's like, there's the Give Me the Keys scene, there's the first hypnosis scene, there's the scene where he's talking about the night his mother died, and it's like, this is a real, like, actor performance amidst this movie that comes off as just like this psychological horror movie. And there's just so much, and like I said, there's obviously the whole satire bit to it where some people question if it's a comedy or not. Uh, but yeah, as this twisted kind of psychological horror thing, it's just really has so much to offer, and it's so rewarding every time you watch it. There's always that stuff in there, and there's always more to grab, or maybe things will hit you'll know things that you noticed before, but when you see them over and over again, it's like each time you see them, they're more effective than the last time because they just really hit harder the more you just really grow to understand it, and that's yeah. And for a movie like this, from a writer director that's known for sketch comedy, it's like mind blowing that Jordan Peele is likely going to get a Best Director nomination and is one of the front runners in the screenplay category for this type of movie. It's just yeah. It's like this is just cool to watch all this transpire. It really is. So yes, I really love what that's doing. Number 5 is Wind River, a movie that I told you when I reviewed it was going to grow on me because all the movies scripted by Taylor Sheridan do that. And so we have this, it's, once again, seems like a very clear-cut kind of procedural thing of Renner and Elizabeth Olsen trying to solve this murder. But what really, I keep saying this, what really, really attracted me to this movie was just how grounded in emotion this movie is, and how much that the whole trying to solve the murder thing is really just the surface of it. And we have all these different tragic backstories, we have the pieces kind of slowly coming together. Renner's performance, the way he's able to... I'm always praising Renner for the way he uses his eyes, even when he doesn't have dialogue, which I find amazing. And then it has all these big moments that might be melodrama in another movie, but they're so effective because we see them from a distance. Like, when her dad breaks down and screams, crying, he's on the other side of a door and we hear it muffled. And when her brother finds out for the first time and he screams in tears, it's a really distant shot. And it's like, the emotion is there, but it's not right up in their faces, and that makes it tougher. That makes it hit harder, actually. And that Sheridan was smart enough to figure that out and realize that that would actually work that way. Is like, because you think, well, I want the characters to know how they're being affected by this by pretty much not even showing you, but giving you just enough to hit harder than being right up in your face with it would ever have been. It's just genius how that was pulled off. And then there's plenty of suspense. There's an incredible shootout. Just all the offerings of a really great crime movie, and the snowy setting too is just really kind of sinister in a way, and the way they use that to, yeah, not to say too much, but if you've seen it, you know what I mean. The way they use the environment, and lastly, to realize that all of this, we have all this, and then it's just kind of the icing on the cake that all this amazing stuff in this movie is ultimately saying something that's incredibly important in real life, and actually trying to get a message out there, but not doing anything that beats us over the head with it, just kind of showing us the tragedy in its natural state, and letting us feel the way we're going to feel towards it. And yeah, and like I said, leaving us on the note of that last scene with Renner and Gil Birmingham outside is just yeah, one of the better endings to a movie we've had, at least in the last few years. I love that ending so much, and it really leaves you on such a high, but the whole movie has to get us there, and does that perfectly. So, number 4 is Baby Driver. Um, I wasn't sure how Baby Driver was going to do when I saw it again, because obviously when I left the theater, I was like really, really high on it. And once again, I've watched it 2 or 3 more times since it's been on DVD, and it just gets better. It gets, like, once again, Edgar Wright's one of those people I was talking about with Peel, where there's so much detail and we expect this from Wright, of course, but I mean, even in movies like Hot Fuzz, I feel like we didn't quite get. Um, well, I don't know. Hot Fuzz is pretty much a masterpiece, but still, it's like every time you watch this, there are so many little things in there that are just constant. Um, it makes this movie feel like it's just alive and on fire from the get-go, from beginning to end. It feels like there is actually fire underneath the cast that just makes them constantly go. And Wright pulls this off better than, even though I don't think his filmography is flawless. He pretty much everything that he has tried to pull off and succeeded at, and all the stuff he's tried to pull off and not succeeded at, are all in this movie, and it's all success. Um, and it's from that, incredible editing to starting off with these chases. Like I said, a foot chase that tops all the car chases in it, and who would have expected that? And like I said, you got this amazing Ansel Elgort is very good, which I never thought I would say. Being the lead in one of my favorite movies of the year, I know we're where we are with Spacey. I still think Spacey's really good in it, but obviously, and John Hamm proves to be a great villain. But speaking of villains, one of my absolute favorite performances of the year, I say again, is Jamie Foxx as Bats. Is one of my favorite villains of once again, the past few years at least. Just and gives the movie a whole other edge every time he's on screen, where you always feel like something very dangerous is afoot and something horrible is going to happen. And there's just as soon as he's introduced until he's no longer in the movie, there is just constant tension. And then once again, when he leaves the movie, there's still just a whole other bag of tricks the movie's got. And like I said, just watching everything play out, like I was talking about when we did one of the podcasts recently. Sometimes I go to YouTube and I watch the foot chase over and over and over again, because there's so many little details in there, from the way like the songs start to overlap whenever he walks through a store, or when the shift in tone when everything seems really bouncy and alive when the music is playing during the shootout, and then John Hamm shoots the music and kills it, and then suddenly it's just all gunfire, and then it's like, whoa, it feels like this just got really serious without the music, and it's like the tone changes so much, but in an effective way to where it really shows you that. And then the scene ending with him no longer having the music to drown out his tinnitus, so he uses his pulse. And it's like, good God, there's just so much. There's just so much to love in here every single time you watch it. And yeah, and it's like, it's one of those movies to where it's like, usually you kind of wait for certain scenes in movies where you're like, oh man, I can't wait till it gets to that part because I love that part. And then later on, it's like, oh yeah, this part I really love too. But it's like, Baby Driver is just scene after scene after scene of the parts that you love and you can't wait to see. And it's like when you say, oh yeah, this is one of the best parts, after a while you're just saying that about every scene in succession. And it's really incredible. I love it so much. And there's 3 movies I think are a little better, believe it or not. Number 3 is War for the Planet of the Apes. I don't know that anybody expected this to be as good as it was. I certainly wasn't, much as I really liked Rise and Dawn. But I mean, Rise and Dawn are really good. Like, really, really good. But I mean, this was like an entirely other level. This was like otherworldly good when you look at the fact that it's the third movie, the third and final movie in a trilogy, of just what started off as like, hey, we're gonna reboot an old franchise, and when does that ever amount to something like this? This is basically like Planet of the Apes now has its Nolan trilogy, if you want to look at it from a Batman stance. Um, and it's like, okay, so you got a Planet of the Apes movie with these effects. Good God. Andy Serkis, by the way, should be winning every Best Actor award, much as I love Brolin and Only the Brave, and much as, all the frontrunners in the Oscar season are doing. But I mean, this is just, and on top of him, these effects, when you look at these apes, it is so incredibly unreal. When I watch this movie, I cannot believe I'm looking at it. I cannot believe it exists when you look at these effects. But in continuing on this, with that being said, we now have a new Planet of the Apes movie. But it starts off like it's Platoon, and then in the middle there's an Odyssey that's the size and scope of The Revenant, and then basically ends up being The Great Escape. And it's like, how the fuck did they pull this off and make what Matt Reeves did here? Oh my god. Matt Reeves is going to do great things in his career. Like he did, obviously he did, like Cloverfield and Let Me In and all that, before doing Dawn and War. But the way this was pulled off is just, and Caesar, obviously it really works if you watch them all three in succession, or at least like over a period of 3 days. And Caesar becomes like a protagonist for the ages, like one of the absolute like movie heroes we may have ever had. And that's a lot. That's like over 100 years worth of movies, and I think Caesar is going to stand out as one of the ultimate protagonists. And top it off on the fact that this is a franchise that already existed once, and that they can bring it back in this way. And it's like, and we saw where some of those went. Obviously, the Heston movie is legendary and continues to be, holds up incredibly. The sequel's not so much. I like Conquest a lot, actually. Maybe in kind of a guilty way, I don't know. But yeah, that they just really completely reestablished the phrase reboot with this, and it's like, this is gonna set a standard for that word now that most things are not gonna live up to. But yeah, I can't. Woody Harrelson, obviously, we got a whole vendetta plot going on top of all this too, which once again seems like it's kind of a bit. We know all that, but they just handle it in such a way, such an unexpected way. When we learn more about Woody Harrelson's character, and it's just constantly exceeding your expectations at every corner. Even the comedy relief by Steve Zahn is just so much more than you would expect. Obviously, he's still silly and slapsticky, but there are moments when he's a little ambiguous at the start, and it's a genuinely great performance. And so I cannot say enough good things about it. Number two is It. For a long time I was saying, oh, The Conjuring is the best horror movie we've had this decade. It's going to be, The Conjuring has really set a bar. We're never going to pass The Conjuring in regards to what horror movies have brought us. And now It has happened. And, and the bar just got significantly higher for horror. And yes, I know, because the movie got so much acclaim, and because so many people, were scared as hell of it, yeah, you're going to have your little badasses coming out talking about it so wasn't scary, it's overrated because it's not scary, or whatever. I don't really give a fuck whether you found it scary or not. This movie is still incredibly, just to put it absolutely mildly, well put together, was what I was going to say. But because the way it does the scares itself, because this is a movie where, it's not a movie where, like, when it's over, overnight I'm, like, freaking out. It's not anything like that, but the experience of watching it when you're actually in it is so intense. Like this, and the thing is we talk about, horror movies always resorting to cheap jump scares, which is just the thing now. And yeah, a lot of people just saw this as yet another jump scare movie. which I'm not going to argue because, yes, the movie is almost 2.5 hours of jump scares, pretty much. But the it's all about the way they're executed. And this movie, the way it's right in your face like that, the controversial idea of having Pennywise come towards the camera, like almost like he's breaking the fourth wall, is so incredibly effective because it's one of those rare cases where when you're watching a horror movie and you see the antagonist, it feels like he's fucking coming for you when these jumps happen. There is the, okay, I talked about not getting freaked out in the dark. There is one case where it was like, oh god, don't. And that was when they would show the Patrick Hockstetter scene in the TV spots. And it's like, I'm fucking sitting here watching fucking Nick at Night at fucking 2 in the morning with all my fucking lights out, and they're playing that clip in the TV spots where the balloon pops and Pennywise is standing in the sewer getting ready to attack Patrick Hockstetter, and it's like, I do not want to fucking see that shit in the dark. And it's like, that's when it gets to me. But yeah, those scenes where they play with that, like the way they use the balloon, and where it's like, it's not the balloon's presence, it's that the fucking thing's gonna, we hear that stretching sound and then it pops, and it's like, what's behind the pop? That's the scary thing. And they don't really overload on the gore or anything. There's definitely more gore than we've seen in this story before. But, no, it's all about kind of genuine scares, and it feels like even stuff that sounds ridiculous when you talk about it on paper, like the burned headless body chasing Ben through the library, but it's like I said, it feels like the movie is coming out of the screen and just at you. And in the wrong movie, that could be really obnoxious. But this movie just really feels like it's a legitimately scary movie. It really is. And like I said, that doesn't necessarily have to mean that like you can't fucking sleep after you see it, or you're like, actually shaking or anything. But it's like this. It's just like I said. That's the best way I can put it. It's a fucking intense experience. And once again, amidst all this, amidst feeling like you're being physically attacked and, chased by the movie, by the leper, by anything, there's the story of the kids, and yes, it takes the whole coming of age angle, and but there's just so much emotion added to that. And like some people say, and yeah, once again, they take cliches and they kind of turn them. Like the scene I usually get mad at where everybody breaks up. And it's like they're just doing this for conflict and they'll solve it, so what's the point? But you get to love these characters so much. It's the scene when, what happened? Like Bill shoves Richie to the ground. And it's like we've seen these characters get so close and be the absolute best friends and go through this together, and it becomes an experience that unites them forever. And it's like that moment when they're all going to split up and get mad at each other, and you think, oh, this old thing. But when Bill shoves Richie to the ground, it's like, dude, that's one of your best friends. You're all in this together, and it breaks your fucking heart, and you want to see them come back and kill it. And yeah, it's just all really effective, and not just a scary way, but an emotional way as well. And what else can I possibly say here that hasn't been said a billion times over, and I didn't already say when I initially reviewed it? But yeah, the bar for horror movies just went straight through the fucking stratosphere. It's so and obviously enormous compliments to Bill Skarsgård, and the huge breakout of the year, in my opinion. Once again, another one of my favorite performances of the year. My favorite supporting actress performance of the year, for sure, Sophia Lillis. I cannot wait to see what she's going to do with her career, because it's going to be good, whatever she's going to do. Even if from now on she does like shitty movies, she'll probably be the best thing about those shitty movies. But I'd like to think we're going to get to see her in some really good stuff, and she's going to really get to show off some more of the great talent that she showed that she has in this. So that's very exciting. So by process of elimination, obviously number one is 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. worth noting real quick before I say anything else, this is the first time in exactly a decade that my favorite movie of the year has been a potential frontrunner for Best Picture. That's extremely exciting, but I don't want to jinx it now. But so once again, with the review I did and with the podcast we've been doing, what can I say about Three Billboards that I haven't said already or that other people haven't already said? I obviously went into it loving Martin McDonagh's stuff. He did In Bruges, which is one of my favorite movies ever. I really love Seven Psychopaths. I especially love Seven Psychopaths the more I see it. Seven Psychopaths is probably still my favorite Sam Rockwell performance, and now we're probably going to see him win an Oscar working with the same writer-director. And like, this movie just has so much to offer from so many different angles, much like a lot of the movies we've been talking about. Because there's obviously his trademark dark comedy. He juggles themes in a way I have never seen, where he takes these absolutely dark subjects, and it's like look at In Bruges, for instance, and it's like, where will you ever find a movie that is as equally hilarious and depressing? And it's like, how does somebody pull that off? It is foreign to me how his mind comes to this and makes these masterpiece movies that just deal with all these different themes and can do them in such both funny and tragic ways. But it's more than that. They're dealing with grief, domestic violence, depression and suicide, racism, police brutality, and none of it feels like they're overdoing it. None of it feels like it's starting to bloat the story. It all comes together within one place and tells one story so effectively. But despite the fact that we have all these different things going on, all these different themes, and plus the story of Mildred hoping to find her daughter's killer and trying to call out the police, it's almost entirely character driven. There are moments when this amazing plot just realizes it needs to take a back seat, and let's just watch Mildred do this one thing. Let's watch Mildred talk to a deer, or talk to her slippers, or have a human moment with Woody Harrelson. And then, obviously, there's been so much praise, as we've been seeing in the award season as well. Dixon's arc. Sam Rockwell's whole storyline. And as I was saying before, he's like one character at the beginning, and he's another character at the end. And it's just incredible to think that these two characters we see at the beginning and end are the same person. And that is completely compliments to the writing and what Rockwell does. And like I said, there are moments I'm just falling in love with that bar scene. This and It are the only movies this year I saw more than once in theaters, when usually that's a relatively common occurrence. But it's when Dixon comes out of the bar towards the end and he lights a cigarette and he looks at a license plate, and it's like, this is the first time we've seen Dixon act like a real cop, and where like he's actually, despite what has happened, what happens to him you think would make him worse than he was before, and then suddenly there's this turn when he realizes the right thing to do. But it's like, there's obviously been some controversy with this, because people got pissed off when he won the Globe, because it's like, oh, we're supposed to be changing, but you gave the Globe to a guy that played a racist cop. And it's like, well, for starters, you obviously don't know what the awards are for. It's like, if Sam Rockwell himself was a racist cop, I maybe see where you're coming from. But no, he is playing one. By all accounts, I believe Sam Rockwell is supposed to be a pretty stand-up guy, so is it not more power to him that he played a fucking racist cop that beats the holy shit out of poor Caleb Landry Jones? And it's, oh god, that scene with Caleb Landry Jones in the hospital just breaks my damn heart. And it's like, he's just a side character, and then he gets this one scene, and you're like, oh my god, this guy is killing me. And it's like, but, anyway, talking about Dixon, it's the thing where somebody responded to the Globe's controversy in a good way, and they said that there's a big difference between redemption and atonement. And it's like the movie doesn't want you to forgive Dixon, but the movie wants you to feel empathy for Dixon for deciding to do the right thing. That doesn't, that doesn't take Red Welby out of the hospital. That doesn't, unfuck up, all the black guys he's apparently beat the shit out of just for being black. But the fact that he makes this turn, or he's attempting to make this turn, even if he probably ultimately won't change in the long run, that there is something to him looking for atonement here by doing the things that he does in the last portion of the movie, and that's just great writing and character work, and Rockwell bringing this amazing, portraying this through this performance is just, it all works perfectly. And obviously, once again, it's what else can you say about Frances McDormand apart from the fact that she just fucking owns the screen. And obviously she's been owning the screen for years, but in this particular way, in a way we've never seen, because it's like, and you see her, she's like on the complete opposite side of Marge Gunderson now, to where it's like she's calling out the police and saying the police aren't doing this, and it's like it makes you wonder if Marge Gunderson could have found Angela Hayes' killer. But yes, so I can't. Okay, look. The problem is that we didn't have any perfect movies this year. Like, Three Billboards is definitely the best movie of the year, but it's not particularly perfect. There's the whole Samara Weaving character that we could take out entirely. There's a few lines of dialogue that I think are trying a little too hard to be clever, like the how much the new Superior elaborates on the hard of reading line. But I mean, there's just there's just too much strength in this movie to worry about that shit. Where it's like, it just feels like such minuscule nitpicking when you see the full story of what this movie's doing, and what else can you say? And hopefully the Oscars might very well be saying the same thing. Probably totally jinxing the hell out of it now, but what have we got to lose? So, that's what we have for this year. Maybe next year we'll get something maybe we'll have a whole list of perfect movies. Maybe we'll be desperately scraping the bottom of the barrel to try to find some, but I don't know. But overall, looking at this list, I'm much happier with this year than I thought I was. We didn't get anything that, is going to go down in history as one of the best things ever, but we got Three Billboards, Planet of the Apes, Baby Driver, giving us all this stuff that's definitely, it just speaks for itself. So, there's that. I don't even know what's coming up anymore. There's, obviously, I'm going to review Molly's Game at the end of the week. And we'll see what else we're getting. Like I said, there's a new straight-to-video Bruce Willis movie. Hooray. And then Versus is going to keep going as well. And then we got all our award stuff coming. Like, all the Oscar predictions, and then all the, SAG is going to be happening. A lot of very fun and exciting things, and hopefully we see the best movie of the year continue to be called that. Hopefully people follow along with the Globes. I don't know, we'll see. So, yes, and like I said, if yours is totally different from this, which it might very well be, that's great too, because we all love what we love, and that's why we go to the fucking movies, is it not? So, on that note, we're done.